Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. A subscriber to this channel recently asked me to do something on George Washington's farewell address from September of 1796. And so I looked it up. It's been a while since I've read it. And I think most folks are generally aware that Washington warned of the danger of political parties and foreign entanglements. And all that's true. You can read it for yourself. It's easy to find online. And at 6,000 words, it is a good read. Now, I thought, how can I relate this to the Civil War? Is there a connection there? And it occurred to me that perhaps in the lead up to the war or the very beginning of the war, editorials might have used excerpts from Washington's farewell address to make particular political points or acknowledge what was going on in the country. And so I looked at my favorite database, newspapers.com, did a search for 1861, and sure enough, came up with several references that were excerpting particular parts of Washington's farewell address. And they didn't reference the well known parts that we talk about today. As I mentioned earlier, the political parties and relationships with foreign countries. That really wasn't part of what they were going after. It was really more of the positive stuff that Americans should be thoughtful about that Washington left behind as part of his legacy. Three of the excerpts I wanted to share with you tonight because I think they were definitely a big part of what was going on in 1861, and the fact that writers from that time period were going back about 80 years in time to look at Washington's life and times as a general, his presidency, and then, of course, that 1796 address. So the first excerpt is related to the importance of preserving the Union. And here's what Washington has to say. Quote, "The unity of government, which constitutes you one people, is also now dear to you. It is justly so, for it is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your property, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. But as it is easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth, as this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously directed. It is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness, that you should cherish a cordial, habitual, and immovable attachment to it, accustoming yourselves to think and speak of it as of the palladium of your political safety and prosperity, watching for its preservation with jealous anxiety, discountenancing whatever may suggest even a suspicion that it can, in any event, be abandoned, and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts. For this, you have every inducement of sympathy and interest. Citizens by birth or choice of a common country, that country has a right to concentrate your affections. The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. With slight shades of difference, you have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles. You have in common cause fought and triumphed together. The independence and liberty you possess are the work of joint councils and joint efforts, of common dangers, sufferings, and successes. So that's pretty heavy duty 18th century language in play. But what I'm hearing Washington say here is you need to think about the whole of the country and you need to be patriotic. You need to guard the nation. You need to guard the country and think about the whole goodness of the country rather than the individual parts. Meanwhile, don't let politics, the insidious politics, try to chip away at the Constitution. So that's my read on it. Interesting stuff. Now, here's the second passage. This is maybe a warning, but it seems healthy the way he says it. Have respect for the authority of our laws. So here's how Washington gets at it. Quote, to the efficacy and permanency of your union, a government for the whole is indispensable. No alliances, however strict, between the parts can be an adequate substitute. They must inevitably experience the infractions and interruptions which all alliances in all times have experienced. Sensible of this momentous truth, you have improved upon your first essay by the adoption of a constitution of government better calculated than your former for an intimate union and for the efficacious management of your common concerns. This government, the offspring of our own choice, uninfluenced and unawed, adopted upon full investigation and mature deliberation, completely free in its principles and the distribution of its powers, uniting security with energy, and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, has a just claim to your confidence and your support. Respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, acquiescence in its measures are duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political system is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitutions of governments. But the constitution which at any time exists till changed by an explicit and authentic act of the whole people is sacredly obligatory upon all. The very idea of the power and the right of people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. Now, that one seems really aimed at America on the verge of civil war in 1861. References to the whole country, references to change the Constitution. He doesn't say the word amendment, but I think that's what he's suggesting here. And enacting various laws is something that should be done in concert by the whole people, not one faction. So there's Washington, maybe in a way, sort of prescient about the troubles that plagued the country in 1861. Now, the third passage and the final passage I want to share with you is about regional differences. They're there, they're real, and you can get very vested in them, but they're offset by remembering the benefits of being a whole country. And in fact, it's that larger benefit that if Washington is to weigh the two, it's that whole country benefit that is really where we should be looking. So here's how Washington says it. Quote, in contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as matter of serious concern that any ground should have furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western, whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference of local interests and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien and to other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. The inhabitants of our Western country have lately had a useful lesson on this head. They have seen in the negotiation by the executive and in the unanimous ratification by the Senate of the treaty with Spain and in the universal satisfaction at that event throughout the United States a decisive proof how unfounded were the suspicions propagated among them of a policy in the general government and in the Atlantic states unfriendly to their interests in regard to the Mississippi. They have been witnesses to the formation of two treaties, that with Great Britain and that with Spain, which secured to them everything they could desire in respect to our foreign relations toward confirming their prosperity. Will it not be their wisdom to rely for the preservation of these advantages on the union by which they were procured? Will they not henceforth be deaf to those advisers, if such there are, who would sever from them their brethren and connect them with aliens? So I think you can gather the meaning there. If the federal government or a particular section is working on some sort of a deal that seems like it's regional in its effect, in its real impact. In this case, they're talking about treaty in Mississippi, which on the surface would seem to benefit the South and the West. And by West, we're not talking about California and Oregon and the territories that later became all the Western states. Aren't not quite there yet, but he's talking about the what today would be, I guess, the Midwest. So he's trying to make the point that, if you've got that feeling of, wow, the Midwest is going to benefit or the South is going to benefit, it's true, but that benefit spreads across the rest of the country. So as you're contemplating decisions and ideas that are brewing in particular regions, it's important to think about it that way, but also think about how it benefits all of us. The whole by the people, for the people, Washington form of government. So there you have it, a few excerpts from Washington's farewell address that gained new interest and traction in newspapers on the verge of the Civil War in early 1861. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.